All right, everybody, Ableton just made a huge update for Ableton Live 12. 12.1 is currently in beta as I'm making this video, but it adds a ton of features to Ableton Live and fixes a lot of the things that I've been complaining about Push 3. So if you've held off on either getting a Push standalone or getting Live 12, I think now is the time. I'm only going to talk about a few key features that are really meaningful to me in my workflow, but I'll leave links down below so you can look at the full release notes. And also lots of other great content creators have covered this update as well, so definitely go show them some love if I don't talk about a feature that's important to you. All right, let's start with the long-awaited Autoshift, the pitch correction finally built into Ableton Live. This is something I've been waiting for so long. I can't believe it took this long to actually do this. It's called Autoshift. I'm not really sure why. I mean, we can shift things around like formant and whatever, but let's go ahead and give this thing a spin first and foremost, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. I'm going to run my voice through this thing. Little instrumental with a few splice loops put together. Let's see what we come up with. Sounds pretty good and pretty natural. Let's turn smoothing off so you can hear that classic hard tuned style that Autotune is sort of most known for. It's pretty cool. I mean, I'm just doing a little falsetto thing here, but you can definitely tell the difference, and I think the smooth mode does a really good job. Now let's actually record a vocal line here, and I'm going to show you some of the things we can shift around about the sound. Here we go. All right, a simple little vocal line there. Let's hear it back. All right, so hopefully you can bear with me for a moment on this vocal sample. We have the ability to change the pitch by semitone, up or down 1 octave. We can also fine tune it, so we can do a little bit of detuning if we want. We can also change the formant. Make me sound like a really low, bassy singer. Or a little higher and more nasally. This is great for creating different vocal layers. You can dial in vibrato here. Let's make it really extreme. That sounds pretty interesting. And of course, you have all the basic things you would want from pitch correction, meaning you have strength, which I think having it on smooth and 100% sounds pretty good. You can set the root of your scale and your scale type. And also you can do a dry wet blend, which will result in kind of a chorusy type sound. There's also a live mode for if you want the lowest latency possible. I think it's still a little buggy right now, but we're still in beta, so let's assume that's going to get fixed for the actual version update. You'll also want to set the range of your singer here on the left. If they're singing really high in the falsetto, in the mid-range, or in the bass range, this will give you the most accurate pitch correction. Let's bring that vibrato down. You dial up the reverb. Okay, and one more feature of this Autoshift is MIDI, being able to control the Autoshift with MIDI. So you can use any MIDI controller, or you can draw in MIDI on a separate MIDI track and control the Autoshift with that MIDI. You can see here that I have it routed, so it's receiving MIDI from track 10, this purple MIDI track here, which is armed. And then when I play notes on my controller, you're going to see those notes light up. You can do this monophonically. And again, now it's going to take no information from what you're playing. It's going to ignore what was actually sung. So I think you could have a lot of fun with that, messing with a sample, or you could actually just draw out the MIDI of the melody that your singer was singing to be sure that Autoshift is going to correct to the notes that you want it to. Another cool part of this is you can turn any single vocal line into a harmony. So if I hold multiple notes here, it actually starts to sound pretty good, and you can go up to 8 voices. even though this line was kind of not that great that I sang, it sounds pretty good when we start messing with it. So I'm excited to A, just use it for normal standard pitch correction, and B, use it for a little bit more experimental stuff. But this is a long awaited feature of Live, and I'm so stoked that they finally added it. And may I remind you, when they add things to Live, they also add them to Push Standalone. So to be able to have pitch correction now on Push 3 Standalone, that is huge. All right, another significant and welcome but unexpected addition was the creation of the drum sampler. This is essentially a new sampler that focuses on, I guess, one-shots. It's really meant for drum one-shots, but we can push it a little further and do other things with it. Talk about that in a moment. So let's first and foremost just drop a kick drum hit into the drum sampler. In my mind, what drum sampler is an even more simpler. Because if you think about it, if I'm just working with drum one-shots, there's a few quick controls that I want to get to that if I was just working in Simpler's got a lot going on this interface right here. It's worked fine in the past, but I think drum sampler is just a little bit more convenient. So when I'm working with single drum samples, I want quick access to things like attack, or the hold, or the decay. And then we want to be able to crop in on the sample, whether you do that using the starting point or you move things around with length. Gain and transpose is all here, as well as filtering and resonance. Now, this is where things get really special, the FX section. Stretch is an interesting kind of granular effect here. Well, it's definitely a granular effect, I think, which sounds really cool, but we've got a whole list here of different effects. The two that I think I will be using most often will be the sub oscillator, where we can add a low frequency, a low tone, and so often I get a kick sample that I really like, but it doesn't have that sub oomph to it. So I ended up using drum bus pretty often, because if we take a look at drum bus, it has the boom knob, which essentially does the same thing. You can choose the frequency and you can turn the boom up and down. But now that's built right into the drum sampler. The second one that I might use pretty often is noise. I would often use erosion to accomplish this, just to add a little bit of high-end noise on the top of a percussion hit. Sometimes it's kind of necessary in your mix. Now that is built right into drum sampler as well. And you might be saying, well, what good is this if it's just a random drum sampler on a random track? How about my drum racks? As you all might know, in the past, when you drop a sample into drum rack, it is automatically going to load up a simpler. That's what a drum rack is, or has been in the past, a collection of simplers. But now, if we add a drum sampler to a pad and we right click, save as default pad, now whenever we add a sample into our drum rack, it is going to be a drum sampler instead. I was a little weary of this. Of course, I'm used to using simpler, but I think the additions and also the simplification of the controls that I'm really looking for when I'm working with drums make me confident in committing to that. Drum sampler is the new default drum rack thing for me. Catch a stream in the future and see if I've continued on with that or if I've discovered some issue with that, but I don't foresee it. Now, as I said, there's a bunch of other effects here too, including things like FM. You can get really crazy with some of these. I'm not going to go through each one, but this is a nice list to have here, especially pitch envelope. But where I want to get more experimental, and I haven't done too much of this so far, is by putting samples, maybe like this, into the drum sampler. Even that's cool with a little pitch envelope on it. But I got there so quickly. Stretch, I'm particularly excited to have fun with. So curious to see where I can push this. The drum sampler is definitely not just for drums. And lastly here, I want to spotlight what is not a flashy update at all, but will definitely help me in the future. The ability to view the undo history. So when I click view undo history, I now get this huge list, I think from when I opened the live set. Yes, the last step is new live set. So every change that I've made so far in this project, I can revert back to a point before I made that change, if that makes sense. Think of this as like a timeline of every action that you've performed. And instead of hitting Command Z over and over and over again, like I've done in the past, or being worried about trying something because I think I'm not going to be able to undo back to the previous point, all you have to do is with a click of a button, click that, it will roll back all those changes and you'll get back to where you were. I think that's huge and a really smart workflow improvement that I never really thought of. Now over to the Push 3. I have been very vocal on the internet about my love-hate relationship with Push 3. It's been a great production tool. I've really loved working with the Ableton Live workflow in a standalone device. That being said, when my new album was coming out, I was trying to develop some live performances for that new album, and Push was definitely lacking some features that are essential to live performance and workflow with a standalone device, but they have made some major fixes here in this update. Now, like I said, those performances I was crafting were specifically for my new album, which I released via DistroKid, who has been my distributor since well before they've sponsored the channel, but they are indeed sponsoring today's video. I chose DistroKid because it's easy to just pay one time a year and release as much music as you want. I can upload music right from my phone, I can edit my releases from my phone, and any money I've earned on DistroKid I can withdraw right from the app as well. And the other feature that I very much enjoy using for my releases is the hyperfollow link, basically a landing page that you can create for your music. It will automatically populate with your music on all the streaming sites, but you can add your own links to it. So I can add my Bandcamp link, and I can also even add those videos that I talked about, including my video for Hauntology, which was made with the Push 3, and my video for Nostalgiacore, which I went with other gear for. There's a bunch of other perks for DistroKid artists, but you can check out more of them at the website. The link is down below. That link will also get you 7% off your first year of DistroKid. So if you are looking to release music, I highly recommend DistroKid. They've been a great distributor for me, and I've never had literally any issues. And like I said, I've been using them since well before I even had this channel, really. So thank you once again to DistroKid for sponsoring this video. Alright, in my opinion, some of these features should have already been on Push 3, but they're here now, so I'm not going to complain. We now have the ability to move tracks around. If I press and hold on a track, I can use the jog wheel and rearrange my session here right from the Push itself. Previously, I had to go ahead and send the project back to Ableton Live and then send it back just to move tracks around. We can also do the same thing with scenes. I can press and hold on a scene, turn the jog wheel, and I can move that scene to any position. That is very useful. Previously, I was like duplicating and deleting scenes just to arrange my session view. One thing about this though is that when I press and hold on a scene, it does indeed launch the scene. I don't know if that's intended, but it would be nice to do a press and hold and not actually launch the scene every time I just want to rearrange them. But this is in beta, so I'm not sure if that's intended or not. Another huge one here. Let's go ahead and add a new MIDI track, and we can just add a random instrument. I'm not going to go that deep with it, just pick a random instrument. Now I'm going to add some effects or an effect to that instrument. I'll go to Audio Effects, choose one at random. Let's go ahead and choose Delay, just the stock delay. So I'm going to hold down Shift, select each of the devices I want to group, meaning the instrument and the audio effect, delay, and then I'm going to press group. Now these devices are in a group together and we have macros that we can easily map from Push, no computer required. So if I go to the delay device and I start tweaking the dry wet, at the bottom here, it will say map to macro. So as long as I'm touching that knob there, if I press map to macro, and then I choose which macro I want to map it to just by turning it, press done, and now the dry wet for the delay is mapped to that macro there. So now you can build out full instruments and devices right from Push itself. You could fill up all these macros. Also, as I tweak this here, I can go to the edit screen. I can select all the different macros here from this list. I can rename this macro, and I can set a minimum and a maximum here, as well as delete the mapping outright. Very welcome addition here on the Push standalone workflow. And now, a feature that has been the bane of my existence with Push standalone, a feature that is so basic, I can't believe they didn't include it at launch. Now there's a new preferences menu where we can do exclusive arm and exclusive solo from this screen, but there's also an option for select on launch. Currently, I have it turned off, and you should too. But I'm going to turn it back on so I can show you how frustrating this was previously, if you don't know what I'm talking about. If I was jamming along to this groove and I was going to use my master effects to do some filter fades, some beat repeats, I've got this device loaded up on the screen, right? What's gonna happen now, let's say I'm building up to a drop and I wanna bring the drums out as I filter fade up. As soon as I stop that drum clip rather, the screen immediately switches to the drum track and the macros for the drum track. So I go from changing the high pass filter on the master to changing the gain on my drum rack. That's so dumb and very frustrating, and makes it so you can't do like cool performances like that. So now back to settings and preferences, select on launch, turn it off. Let's launch this scene again. Go to my master effects here, and let's build up to a big drop here. I'm going to start taking the items out one by one. The screen doesn't change when I launch those clips. And I can go ahead and still play with these macros. My screen doesn't change just because I'm launching a clip. That is huge for live performance, and it's finally here on Push 3 standalone. Another great improvement here is we can now save live sets as our templates here on Push 3. We can just save our project as a template, or we can save it as the default template that will load up every time you boot up Push 3. That is also very welcome update. You can also set templates that are already in your library as your default template. Doesn't seem to be any ability to set the default audio or MIDI tracks yet though, which I'm really hoping for. Another quality of life feature they added, which I can't really show off here, but it is the ability for Push to be able to create its own hotspot, meaning if you're traveling or if you're at a venue, you don't need to connect to their Wi-Fi to transfer or connect to your laptop. Push can be its own hotspot that you can connect to with your computer, and you can do any kind of transfer or however you want to work with them that way. You're not reliant on an external Wi-Fi connection. That's really great as well. Now, these seem just like quality of life updates that maybe should have been there already, and they are that. But I want to remind you that the things that are coming along with 12.1 are also going to be available on Push 3 as well. So things like Autoshift, check. Being able to have that pitch correction on Push standalone, again, this thing is going to become a performance master tool here, I think, in a big way. And it was really being held back by some of those key features, but I feel like the additions in 12.1 really resolve most of my complaints. All right, and you know, that's not even half the features they added into Ableton Live 12.1. I mean, they totally rebuilt the limiter. The saturator is a lot easier to use. You can see what's happening in the saturator a lot better. Auto tagging of samples, a groove being automatically added to the default set. I think that's a no-brainer. And it's interesting, right, that this is coming out as a 12.1 release. I don't run a big music tech company, but I'm so curious about what happens where you launch a flagship release like 12, but you've got major features like these loaded in the chamber. And just knowing how long it takes to develop and test features like these, I'm not thinking it was like a response to people like me complaining about the lack of exciting features in 12. I think this was likely their plan, and maybe these features just took a little bit longer to develop. But overall, I'm happy that they're here. It is a free update for those of you that already own Ableton Live 12. And for those of you that haven't upgraded yet, I am curious to hear if in the comments this 12.1 update is what's going to push you over the edge. And also, if you were thinking about picking up a Push standalone but you haven't yet, did this update push you over the edge for that as well? I'm excited to dig in more in these features. I do live streams pretty much every week on this channel, so tune into one of those and come ask questions, hang out. It's always a good time. There's links down in the description, one from DistroKid, our sponsor for today. If you use that link, it supports the channel. And there's some Ableton affiliate links down below that if you use those, they support the channel a lot. So if you are picking up Live 12 for the first time, if you use one of those links, it would mean a lot to me. Thank you to all my channel members for keeping this channel going. We've got a great community. I'm so happy, and I'm looking forward to hearing you all about your thoughts on the 12.1 update. That's going to be it for now. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.